A Treatise of Satan's Temptations. Part 2. By Richard Gilpin. A Discourse of the Malice, Power, Cruelty and Diligence of Satan. Chapter 4. Part 7. Of Satan's second way of improving his advantages, which is by working upon the understanding indirectly by the affections. This he doth, 1. By a silent, insensible introduction of error. His method herein. 2. By entangling the affections with the external garb of error, a gorgeous dress, or affected plainness, and more. Hence the Apostle, in 1 Timothy 6:4, rakes up all the concomitant filth of error, as envy, strife, railings, evil surmisings, and perverse disputings of men, and lays them at the door of pride. He is proud, knowing nothing. For the engaging of these two thieves, that rob the understanding of its light, Satan hath many artifices in readiness. Pride, which is forward enough of itself, is soon excited by laying before it an opportunity of a seeming rare discovery, or of advancing the glory of knowledge above the common pitch, of being seen and admired as more excellent than others, etc. For upon such unworthy grounds, have some dared to adventure upon strange notions. Yet there is nothing that doth more firmly engage it than contention or dispute, for though the proper end of disputation be the sifting out of truth, yet such is man's pride, and Satan's advantage by it, that it seldom attains its true end, in those that are engaged. Bystanders that keep their minds calm and unbiased, may receive more satisfaction than the contenders themselves. And there needs no other evidence of this than the common experience, which men have of our frequent contentions. Where we have confutations, answers and replies, and yet still all parties continue in their opinions without conviction. So that they that would unfeignedly seek truth, in my mind, take not the best course in their pursuit, that presently engage themselves in a public dispute. For the usual heats that are begot in a contention, alienate their minds from a just impartiality, and the dust they raise blinds their eyes, that they discern not truly. Let us look into this artifice of engaging pride by disputation, and by it the judgment. First we find that when a humor of contending is raised, certain truths are neglected, as to their improvement and practice. For so much of the strength of the soul is laid out upon disputable questions, that little is left for more weighty matters. Secondly, in disputes men's credit is so concerned, that it is a most difficult thing to preserve a faithful regard to verity, especially where they are managed with affronts and contumelies. They that by calm handling might be induced to acknowledge a mistake, will scarce come near that point of ingenuity, when they must be called fool, knave, or ass for their labor. Hence ordinarily, though they profess otherwise, men seek rather victory than truth. Thirdly, in disputes pride and passion are usually heightened, and the stronger the passions are the weaker is the judgment. Eager altercations bring a confusion, both upon the matter of which they dispute, and upon the understanding that should judge. Fourthly, in the heat of disputation, when the mind is inflamed, men usually behave themselves like those in a fray, where they snatch and throw anything that comes to hand, and never mind where it hits. They will affirm or deny anything that may seem any way to bring them off. Fifthly, these assertions being once affirmed must be maintained, and so errors and contentions increase without end. Disputes fix a man in his persuasion, and do, as it were, tie him to the stake, so that right or wrong he will go through with it. Sixthly, some dispute in jest against their present judgment, and yet at last dispute themselves into a belief, of what they wantonly at first affirmed. As some tell lies so long, that at length they believe them to be true. Seventhly, a sadder mischief often follows a disputing humor, which is a hazard of the loss of all truth. Men dispute so long till they suspect all things, and after a long trade of skepticism turn atheists. After the same manner doth the devil engage anger in all disputes and controversies, for it keeps company with pride, wherever there is a provocation. And besides this, anger stirring up injuries and wrongs, hath often engaged men, as it were in revenge, to change their opinion, and to take up another way or doctrine. Nay, often that simple mixture of pride and anger which we call emulation, hath privately tainted the integrity of mind, and prepared it for the next fair opportunity of error. This is noted of Arius, by Theodoret, that when Alexander was chosen bishop of Alexandria, he envied him the preferency, and from thence sought occasions of contention, which after a little while, the devil brought to his hand, as we have heard. So great is the power of these two passions over the understanding, that we have cause to wonder at their success. Seldom or never can it be shown that any ringleader in error, was not visibly tainted with pride, or not apparently soured with discontents and emulation. 8. To these ways of blinding the understanding by the affections, I shall add but one more, which is this, Satan endeavors mainly to adorn an error with truth's clothing. He takes its ornaments and jewels to dress up a false doctrine, that it may look more lovely and dutiful. I mean that he designs, where errors are capable of such an imitation, to put them into the way, method, garb, and manner which truth doth naturally use. If truth be adorned with zeal, order, strictness, or have advantageous ways of managing itself, error must straightway imitate it in all these things. And though he that looks near may easily discern that it is not the natural complexion of error, but an artificial varnish, and such as doth no more become it, than a court dress doth become a coarse, clownish, country person, for you may at first look usually discover the wolf under sheep's clothing, and under the garb of the apostles of Christ you may see the ministers of Satan, yet are the credulous usually affected with these appearances. If they find a professed strictness, a seeming severity, an imitation of the ways of truth, or of the fruits thereof, they commonly seek no further, but judge that to be truth which doth the things that truth doth. And if error can handsomely stand in competition with truth, upon a pretense of being as effectual in good works, and doing things of themselves, lovely and of good report, it doth much gain upon the good liking of those, whose consideration, leads them not much further than fair appearances. I shall only exemplify this by the art and policy which Julian used to set up paganism, and to ruin Christianity. And those who have observed the ways which he took to gain his end, will readily acknowledge he was as well skilled in advancing error, and suppressing truth as any whosoever, and knew exactly to suit his designs to man's inclinations. He observing that Christian religion had some particular things, in its practice and way which made its face to shine, as that it had persons solemnly, set apart by ordination for teaching the mysteries of the gospel, and for managing the public worship of God. That these persons were to be grave in their carriage, and exemplary in a strict holy conversation. That the constitutions of religion appointed certain necessary, and effectual ways of discipline, for punishment, and restoring of offenders, and bringing them to repentance. That it took care of the comfortable maintenance, of those that had given up themselves, to the ministry of the word and prayer. That it also enjoined a relief of the poor and strangers, etc., taking notice, I say, of these excellencies in Christianity, and how lovely they were in the eyes of their enemies, he appointed the like constitutions for paganism, and ordained that the idol temples should be suited in conveniency, and comeliness to Christian churches, that there should be seats and desks for the chief doctors, and readers of Gentilism, who at set times were to exhort the people and pray with them. And that colleges and monasteries should be erected for them, and for the relief of the poor and strangers. He commanded discipline and penances for the chastisement of offenders. He required that their priests should seriously give up themselves to the worship of God, as also their families, that they should not frequent shows and taverns, nor practice any infamous trade and art. Thus Sizomen reports him, and gives us a copy of his letter to Ascius, high priest of Galatia, to this purpose. And all this he did to bring Gentilism into credit with the vulgar, whom he had observed to be affected to Christianity for its order, strictness, and government. Yet is not this the only instance, that may be given in this kind, for observe but any error that by schism sets up for itself, in a distinct party, and you shall see that, though it departs from the truth of the Church, and from its communion, yet still, as the Israelites did with the Egyptians, it carries away with it these jewels of the Church, and keeps to some considerable part of the Church's way, though modified according to its own bent, that it might have a luster with it, to make it taking with others. These 8 particulars are the most remarkable ways of Satan, whereby the affections are gained to a good liking of error, and by them the judgment secondarily corrupted, to call it truth. Thanks.